Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Rumcast. My name is John Gulla, and with me is Will Hookinga, and together we are hosting this podcast that talks all things rum related with the people who love and shape it. And speaking of people who clearly have a love for rum, Will, our first interview for 2023 is with a man who spent an entire year away from his home and nearly circumnavigating the globe to follow his rum passion.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. 28 rum distillery visits, a slew of countries across the Caribbean, Barbados, Martinique, Guadeloupe, Marie Gallant as well, which is part of Guadeloupe, Madeira, going all the way back toward Europe, then Scotland, then Amsterdam to visit E&A Shear, London, or Liverpool, to visit Main Rum Company. This was, John, a rum journey of epic proportions that our friend, listener, and founder of the New Zealand Rum Society, Richard Nicholson, embarked on a 13-month epic rum quest.
An odyssey. And we should call it a rum odyssey, yes.
Yeah, and he visited so many distilleries. He had so much to share. I feel like it's if you are ever interested in doing rum-related travel, visiting places, we wanted to talk to Richard because we wanted to get the kind of traveler's perspective on distilleries to see, things to do, that sort of thing. But it also just became this really interesting snapshot of kind of the world of rum in 2021/2022, and just so many interesting insights. I learned a ton about Rum Agricole because, as listeners will hear, that was a big emphasis of his trip. And yeah, just so much in this interview. And Richard is very entertaining, very knowledgeable guy as well. So it's a different interview from what we've done in the past, and I'm really excited for people to listen to it.
It's always nice when we can talk with somebody at length that is not necessarily in the industry themselves, but is just a fellow rum lover who has taken that to an extremes of sort in what he did, and hearing the details of how he was able to plan it, all of that thought process that went into it, some of the things that were just fortune smiling on him, all of that is really fun to hear. So I'm glad we were able to do it, and like you said, it's going to be fun for people to hear and listen to. But before we get to that, Will, let's talk about some other things going on here.
Okay.
I know you recently saw some articles that piqued your interest, yeah?
Well, so our first episode of the new year, we were making our rum predictions for 2023. And I don't know about you, John, but as I was kind of going through my predictions and everything, I was looking back at the end of 2022. There was the big Brown-Forman acquiring Diplomatico story that broke. And I was like, should I make a prediction related to kind of acquisitions, things like that? And I was like, it's so businessy, it's not really like the joyful side of rum. And then also mergers, acquisitions, things like that happen so often in the spirits industry that it's kind of like, oh yeah, I predict another rum company will be acquired. It's sort of like, like the sun will rise tomorrow as well. So I ended up not going with it. And then just very funny timing, maybe the same week we released that episode, maybe the week after, there was another major acquisition, which was a rum brand that started in the Philippines, Don Papa, being purchased by Diageo for $281 million.
Chump change.
There's some kind of like thing based on sales performance that may allow the price to go up to $474 million over the next few years.
This is like sports contracts now. Like.
It's like like performance incentives. You make a Super Bowl, you get a bonus.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but so I was looking at that, and then I was thinking back. Matt Petrie has written a bunch about these acquisitions as they've happened, and he also noted one at the end of 2022 with Pernod Ricard announcing that they were substantially increasing their stake in a company called Sovereign Brands, and Bumbu is basically the biggest company within Sovereign Brands. And so, I think I can kind of see in your face, you're seeing like the through line of this trio of acquisitions, which is that these are all rum brands that, in the rum enthusiast circles or maybe looked down a little bit on. Some of them are known for, sweetening their rum, or, Bumbu is like a straight up flavored rum, which I think it says on the label. But, Don Papa, Diplomatico, those are ones that like the hydrometer test sites and people have done things on. And, there's something going on in a lot of those releases. And we talk so much about transparency, and we're so focused on kind of like the enthusiast circles that, if you spend all your time on the rum forums and everything, transparency, no additives and stuff, like it seems like the future. Yeah, you get all excited about it. But then, you see things like this, these hundreds of millions of dollars pouring into brands that are basically like doing the opposite in some cases of what a lot of people in rum enthusiast circles want to see, which is just more transparency around if you're, adding stuff to your rum in some way. And so I just wanted to ask you, like, how does this make you feel like we're never going to get there in terms of transparency when you see this kind of news? What is kind of your takeaway from that?
Yeah, so my immediate thoughts, as you kind of foretold by my initial reaction and my face, was why these brands? I know the answer to that, which is that they sell well.
Money.
And it's all about money, right?
Yeah.
But I'm also going to choose to believe that there is a sliver of hope that might be here with this.
Enlighten me on that
follow
sliver.
Follow me through with this. So if you think about the way that these corporate strategies are and what they're doing, I do believe that sometimes there is a way for these companies to kind of swoop in and make changes that could be for the better. And what I mean by that is they could have a better ear to the ground for the rum societies, and they could be finding ways to maybe keep going with some of the products that sell well, but also branch out. There's more investment, there's more money, and maybe there's going to be higher ABV releases, and maybe with less additives or no additives in them. I know it's a far cry, and I'm really choosing to be optimistic here with this.
We got to put our faith in the corporations, is what you're saying.
Well, so like, in today's kind of social media world where there's a lot louder voices for things from smaller interest groups, like a rum enthusiast, I'm sure they have to see those. And bigger companies...
Yeah, maybe.
I'm not saying they care. I'm saying maybe there's somebody that does and that says, hey, we have an opportunity here to expand on this and maybe capture others. It's a tough, like I said, I'm really trying to push for trying to see the silver lining here.
Silver lining, yeah. It was kind of interesting. I was reading one of the articles about the Don Papa deal. It was in Just Drinks, and they included some quotes and analysis from someone who is, I believe, an analyst at this investment bank called Jefferies. And he said, his name is Ed Mundy. He said, "We believe there are reasons for optimism for the rum category, in particular in the high-end dark variants." And then it says that he pointed to three things: a renewed interest in sipping rums, the drink's relatively affordable price point, and its sweeter taste profile as three reasons the category is set to prosper. So that's, when I read that as well, the whole, it's sweeter. That's one of the key things. So it was just kind of like, oh God, here we go again,
But hey, right, we've talked about this in the past. Sometimes a lot of people will find their way through that into the rums in more rum enthusiast circles that we like to gravitate towards.
It's true.
More people sipping rum overall. Yeah. And more people finding their way through. Some of them will get left at that level, and that's okay. That's as we've talked about before, Will, I don't look down on people for enjoying sweetened rums. We wish it was more transparent, but it's totally fine if that's what your palate wants.
Right.
But I also have seen a trend that as people get exposed to different rums that don't have those additives, they tend to start gravitating towards the ones that don't. So... there's a possible nice silver lining here. So
that's a good point. I think like the way I look at it is kind of, we talk all the time about how we want there to be like more appreciation for rum, kind of a growth in people's recognition of it, more people drinking it, that kind of thing. And like, this is kind of what happens when you want awareness of a spirits category to
Yeah.
grow. Like stuff that is currently selling well, that's going to be what a lot of larger companies gravitate to. And in some ways, you know, that almost incentivizes more companies to make rum like that. Like I go back to when we were talking to Joshua Singh from 1423, and, you know, the SBS stuff, it's additive free, but he has brands that he does sweeten and he's open about it. And he's like, yeah, I do that, you know, so I can make enough money to do everything else that I want to do because that stuff sells. And I'm paraphrasing there, you know, along those lines. But, and so when I hear that kind of thing, part of me does feel for the brands that aren't doing that, you know, that aren't sweetening, and they're having to deal with that expectation of like, well, now more and more people are going to think rum is supposed to be a lot sweeter than it is when you don't add stuff to it. So for me, I think if we really want more transparency, it's going to be on the enthusiasts, right? It's going to be more people trying to put education out there, creating resources for people, you know, to put this out there and have productive conversations that don't alienate people, but bring them to this understanding that like rum doesn't have to be sweet. And in fact, when it's not sweet, it can be really, really damn good.
Right.
And you know, encouraging the brands that are doing things the right way to keep doing them. But so yeah, it was just kind of an interesting trio of things happening and being like, wow, okay, I guess this is a reminder of these kinds of rums are making a lot of money. So anyway.
You know, it's funny. I walked into a local liquor store here in Miami recently to look for something, and they have their regular bar or shelves, their regular shelves, and then there's like this like lockup shelf. But usually that's like behind the counter in most stores. No, this one was like a lockup with a glass front on the same shelf. Okay. And in there are like these really high, you know, dollar valued rums. Like I think they had Mount Gay Port Cask in there, and they had like a Worthy Park 12 year. And then in the middle of these is Boom Boo in the glass case.
One of these things is not like the others, right?
So just to your point about, I guess, where a lot of people are gravitating towards right now, gotta say, you know, Boom Boo seems to be selling or popular. So
indeed.
Well, speaking of embarrassing things, so, Will, we didn't do this year in our 2022 year in review episode that we just did, but we did in the year before. We talked about moments from the previous year where that stuck out to us from
where
different episodes that
ourselves.
We did.
Yeah.
Well, in one of those we did, I think, was most embarrassing moment. But we didn't do that this year. We had a lot of information already in that episode. I don't think we wanted to pull it out too long. But I wanted to get back to this, and there's a specific reason I wanted to get back to it.
All right.
So I wanted to start out with my 2022 most embarrassing moment for us on the podcast. And I say for us for a reason here. And that was...
you know, John, I have to interrupt you and say, like, we came so close to getting through this year without having to revisit our most embarrassing moments on the podcast. And you're like, no.
No.
We have to put this into the intro for the next episode. You know, I guess this is just, you know, you keeping us accountable. So
well, no, it's stick with me here.
I'm a little worried, but I'm interested to see where this is going.
Okay, well, like I said, stick with me here because there is a tie into this episode as well. So that's why I'm choosing to do it. So my most embarrassing moment from 2022 was way back in February with Mitch from Black Tot. We had an episode where we talked with Mitch from Black Tot, and really, really great interview. And at the very, very end of this interview, I think you're starting to remember, I could tell, he did a toast for us where he had us say line by line.
Oh, right,
He I think this is a thing for him where it's like a classic thing. There are two ships, but the best ships are friendships and all that, right?
Yes, yes.
Well, so he was doing this line, and the first line is there are two ships.
Yes.
But, you know, Mitch's, I guess when he was saying it, he has an accent. He's from, you know, the UK, and he said there are two ships, right? And
we both thought he said tall ships.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we were struggling so hard. And the most embarrassing thing about that is I know this poem, like, I'm familiar with it. And yet I still didn't pick it up after like multiple times where I'm like, tall ships, what are we talking about here? And what is this? And so I was super embarrassed by this. And I'm sure somebody out there had to have noticed that way back and listened to that and wouldn't go like, what are they doing?
There are tall ships. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, some of them, they have those masts that just, you know, stretch all the way way to the sky almost. Yeah, I do remember that, and I felt extremely stupid in the moment. And you know what? I had forgotten about it completely until you forced it into this episode as well. So hopefully now everyone goes back and listens to it again and we sound dumb all over again.
If we can't make fun of ourselves, Will, then what are we doing here? Anyway, that was February of that year. I don't think we eclipsed that moment of embarrassment the rest of the year. And it seems
Hopefully
like we're
not.
starting off this year with a bang, too, for embarrassment. This one's a little more personal to me.
The word we is doing a lot of work in that sentence.
I was trying to get you out of it. I was moving towards that direction.
Okay.
I think we owe it to people who we've heard, by the way, that the rapid fire section is by far a great, it's something that people enjoy that listen to the podcast.
People like it.
We love hearing that, and we're happy to keep doing it. Well, this rapid fire section that we did with Richard, and I'm not going to spoil it. It was maybe not as well researched on my part as it should have been. So it was kind of a crash and burn. Yeah.
John looked at this rapid fire opportunity. He saw two things. One, Richard is from New Zealand. And two, I, John Gullah, am a huge Lord of the Rings fan,
that is
which
exactly
was filmed in New Zealand. So I'm going to...
Yes.
So Richard must also be a big Lord of the Rings fan, as all New Zealanders must be, right? Yeah.
Yes, that is exactly what I thought. And I was incorrect, as you will hear. And I wanted to tell everybody, this is not Richard's fault. Richard is a great guy, and you'll hear from the rest of the interview. He's great. But for this particular point, yes, I strung him out there, and poor guy, did his best. Yeah.
Richard is he's a good sport. He's a quick thinker. He is witty, but he is not that into Lord of the Rings. And
he's
John
just
had
not.
It wasn't just like one question that you had prepared. You had like 4 questions that all tied in.
It was the whole thing, Will. It was the whole thing.
Built one upon the other, and they all depended on someone being a Lord of the Rings fan.
I had a plan, and that plan was wrecked very early on.
Yeah, so fair warning to everyone. Yes. This rapid fire gets a little bumpy, but hopefully you'll be able to laugh along with us at John's folly in planning this one. But
yes.
Anyway, that's quality control on my part too. I'm supposed to take a look at those. I don't always look at them in advance, and I don't think I did this time. But anyway. We're moving on. It's a new year, John. It's a fresh start. New ways for us to embarrass ourselves. And people will hear one of them on this episode coming up. Mm-hmm. So let's get on to it.
All right, we are here with Richard Nicholson, the founder of the New Zealand Rum Society and world traveler, just freshly back from his worldwide trip to see over 25 rum distilleries, different places like E.A. Shear and Main Rum, 1423, and a ton of rum shows and events he's going to tell us about, and even some judging along the way. So, Richard, we're super thankful and happy to have you on to discuss this, and I guess we can start with, how does it feel after more than a year or about a year to be back home and have had some time to reflect on everything?
Thanks, John. Well, thanks for having me on. I think the first thing is I caught up on sleep. So that was probably the first 2 weeks.
Do you just completely lose track of time zones at some point?
You do. You absolutely do. And you just, it got to that point where I'm going, where am I next? And I'm just looking at my itinerary all the time. But I just crammed as much in there, and I'm sure over the year you'll get a feeling of how I operate, shall we say.
Yeah.
But it is good to be back and have time to reflect, as you say. And I know it was a huge privilege, opportunity of what I've just done, 13 months on the rum road. And, the stats, we can talk about. But basically, the ability to be able to do that is not lost on me in terms of not having a wife, not worrying about the children. It wasn't like I walked out the door and said, right, just going down the road to get some milk and didn't come back for 13 months. So I was able to do it, and maybe we'll get into it, how that actually happened, how fast it happened as well. So we'll talk a bit about that. But yes, it's good to be back, good to connect in with the New Zealand rum scene again. And thank you.
Yeah, I think the question on everyone's minds probably is, how does a trip like this come about? As you just said, 13 months on the road, all over the world. I think 28 distilleries in total, Barbados, Martinique, Guadeloupe, Madeira, Amsterdam, Scotland, all these different places.
Playing the hits, yeah.
Yeah, how did you even begin to conceptualize this trip? What were the absolute, okay, I know I'm going to these places. Do you start with a timeline? Did you just think it was going to be 3 months and then it just ballooned from there? Take us through how this all came into being.
Yeah, well, one would, when you look at a trip this size, one would do a lot of planning, maybe 6 months out, maybe even a year out, and you start looking at where you want to go, start putting money together, all of those things that you would do on any international trip, I guess. And if it's an important one, like this is the most important trip I've ever done, you do a lot of planning. Well, that's what you're supposed to do. That's not what I did. I gave myself 4 days.
Oh, what?
I know.
Okay, explain how that happens. Because my wife and I, we just in September we took a trip to Spain and Italy. That was it. It was like an 11 or 12-day trip, and we probably spent 8 months, I would say, planning it. So.
Same here. I think my wife and I were more than that when we did ours. Yeah, so 4 days.
Yeah.
Yes.
What the hell happened?
Well, you may recall that New Zealand escaped that first part of COVID pretty well. We went into fast, hard lockdown.
Right.
So it meant that we came out really quickly. So we were only really in lockdown for a few months. That was it. We came out of that. So this is now mid sort of 2020, and it was all looking pretty rosy. By the time some of the other strains got here, it was starting to look a little bit worse in New Zealand. It was inevitable that it would happen. This is all leading up to, I woke up, this is now October 21, October the 10th, I think it was, to the news that we were going into another lockdown. And this is going to be our third. And I went, you know what? I don't want to be here. So that was on the Monday. Now, I'd been in touch with Grail around the Barbados rum experience, the BRE. I knew that was coming up in 4 weeks' time. I also knew Ian Burrell's UK show was going to be on the Friday. So from that Monday literally woke up, heard the news or read the news that we're going in another lockdown, I immediately reached out to Peter Holland.
Okay.
And I said, Peter, I'm coming. And he said, oh, good. It'd be great to see you. We can talk a bit more about all those connections. But I said,
what month are you thinking about coming? And you're like,
yeah, when are you coming? And I said, I'll be there on Friday.
Oh.
And literally, that's how it happened. So I fast forwarded everything, as you can imagine, just went into full on, just get everything organized. Flights booked, personal life sorted, everything in 4 days. And I was on a plane via Singapore up to London, arrived London in the morning, first morning of the UK Rum Show.
So you left then, I'm assuming not knowing when you would be able to come back. Is that correct?
That's absolutely great question. So in New Zealand at that time, we also weren't allowing anybody in. We were isolating ourselves as an island. And the earliest the government were indicating was February. So when I left October 16...
This is at least going to be 4 months.
Wow.
Exactly. And so therefore I knew, well, I wouldn't mind then off the back of, by that point, within a matter of minutes, I knew that I was going to do the UK Rum Show, 2 weeks later, fly to Barbados. That part I knew.
Okay.
Then I thought, well, if I've got to be away 3-4 months, I might as well do another couple of islands at least.
While you're in Barbados, yeah, you may as well.
I'm in the Caribbean. Yeah. Why not? And I thought, worst scenario, if the country's still not open up, I'll go back and spend time with my friends in UK, France, that sort of thing. So that's all it was. There was nothing more than that. And some money in the bank account. That's it.
Wow. Did anybody did you in these 4 days time, did you reach out to anybody other than Peter, or was it just you and Peter talking and Gail? How do you even start to say, I know you've got those 2 major landmarks, right, of what you said, but then where are you starting to think, how does your brain even start to put these together to think about how to connect them?
I think that, again, if part of my personality, once I've decided to do something, I will go into, full-on amplified mode to make that then work. So basically, the great thing out of COVID, and there are a number of good things, but you've talked about it a few times on the show, is the way we got more connected into the rum world because we were forced online.
Yeah.
And if you can imagine, we're very isolated in New Zealand. We're down the bottom end of the world there, or top, depending on which way you want to view the world. And the ability to, for the first time ever, really connect in with brands and with personalities and individuals and so on in the rum world was due to COVID. So that's where, if you like, my connections really took off. So things like the Black Top 24 Hour meant by the time I'd done that, by the time I'd also done some online tastings and masterclasses done by Peter Holland, with the Boutique Rum and so on. By that point, so before October, before I made that decision, I already had quite a strong network of vertical
friends all over the world now.
Friends all around the world, exactly. Yeah. So, and even Lance, I'd spent time talking to Lance Surabelli, and others, and they then became quite instrumental in helping me over the next 3 days, saying, do this, don't do this, do that, do that. So that they were my guides. Lance in particular, he's become a very dear friend. He is just a wealth of knowledge. We know that. You only need to look at his look at the lone cane to see that. But more than that, he's very good at cutting through, if you like, and just saying, that's going to work, that's not going to work. So that helped hugely in terms of, by the time I landed in London, I had some further ways I could explore what I wanted to do for the next 4 months.
I remember when this was, I think it was October, we had our happy hour for the Rumcast Patreon, and you jumped on in the middle of that from your camper.
It was like 2 a.m.
and we were, great to see you because we knew you were on like midway through this trip, but then we were like, oh my gosh, the commitment level that you must have, Richard. It was like Will said, 2 a.m. and you're in a camper, and I can't remember exactly what you were telling us, but you already had something planned for tomorrow as well, and we were just like, holy cow. And I know you were telling a few stories there, but when was that in this journey? Just, I hate to jump around, but it was just such a vivid memory that I wanted to find out when that was. And was that at some point where you're just like kind of making it up at this point, or you had a plan by then?
No. So, but this is now, I want to say that would have been about August.
Okay. Right. That seems right.
I think so. That itself, I think, is quite a hilarious story. So what you guys didn't know and what I couldn't say is in that camp, the reason I had the camper van, I'll explain in a minute, but in that camper van was 90 bottles of rum.
Well, thank God you're still with us.
I'm hearing 90 bottles of rum in the van, 90 bottles of rum.
We were probably about 80, 85 by the time I finished the trip. But anyway, so that was... What had happened is, by that point, there's a whole lot of things we probably need to backfill, but we'll worry about that later. I was in Germany. No, Copenhagen. I just finished Germany, so I'd done the German Rum Festival and the German Rum, which I was asked to be a judge for that. And the following week was Copenhagen, so the Denmark rum and whiskey.
I remember you talking about 1423 at that point, so that makes
exactly
sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I generally, for all the other shows and, visits, distillery visits, was flying in, doing my thing and flying out again. This time I thought, well, actually, why don't I drive? And that then also means I can take the rum out of my friend's place, which was sitting, filled up a hole of one of his bedrooms in south of France. I drove from France all the way through France.
Wow.
I also had another special mission, I can talk about that in a minute, loaded up with all of these boxes and boxes of rum.
Wait, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just realized, were you just accumulating bottles of rum throughout this whole journey? I imagine, were those 90 bottles all just stuff that you had collected over the course and that you were planning to bring back to New Zealand?
Yes. So I would say there were a good 20 or 30 were given to me so when I left the Caribbean, I had 2 extra suitcases.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Now here's something for maybe this will be helpful for viewers or listeners. If you are in the French territories, effectively, if you fly there into France, you're doing a domestic flight.
Okay.
So it's a little bit, I'm not saying that you can bring whatever amount you like of alcohol, but it is easier. So basically 2 suitcases full of rum, wasn't even stopped, and people said, "Don't worry about it. Nobody cares. It's a domestic flight."
It's a little bit lax, yeah.
Exactly. So that was partly because obviously I just went absolutely crazy. I went straight to a Carrefour, as you know, and if people can remember that, Carrefour. The supermarkets there, you just go shelf after shelf of the most amazing rums. You know, Agricole rums. Obviously, we're in the French territories. So I went a little bit crazy there. Then, as I continued touring through the Caribbean and went go to distilleries, often very humbling again and incredibly generous hosts, they would go, "This is for you."
Wow.
So, you know, and it was some special bottle. So, of course, they were going to make their way back. I'd also done several trips to Paris by the time I did the camper van trip. So, you know, the rum shops there and other rum shops I could talk about later. But the point is, I amassed by that time quite a lot.
You needed a camper to transport all this rum around.
Imagine you've got like 2 pairs of clothes, a toothbrush, and rum.
I was kind of getting that way. I was definitely starting to ditch stuff. There's no doubt about it. It's like a boat sinking. You say, right, what do you throw first? Well, not the rum.
That's right.
Okay, so I interrupted you. You mentioned you were driving from the south of France to Copenhagen.
So I decided this time I wanted to get the rum out of my friend's place because it was kind of, you know, I didn't want to leave it there too much longer. I was also thinking the trip's coming near an end. I've got to figure out a way of getting back to New Zealand. If I'd had it all picked up from his place by a DHL and then delivered door to door, it was going to cost me over $2,000. So So I was like, no, why don't I get it to a warehouse? A friend of mine's got a warehouse and then get it into a container to be shipped down to New Zealand. So that was the end goal. It was just a matter of working backwards because Germany and Denmark were weekends apart. And I also needed to hunt down these special bottles through France. I thought the best way to do that is in a camper van.
Yeah, I mean, why not? That sounds like an amazing little drive to take. I'm jealous.
It was. There was again, we're going to jump around quite a bit today. I had a few months earlier been up in Amsterdam with, and I was at Mitch's place. And, you know, Mitch Black
Mitch. Yeah,
He had hosted all of these amazing rum people. So you had Ben from Tomasi there. You had Chris from 4023. You had Niels from Sheer. All of these people were there. And we decided that night we all had to bring a bottle. We weren't allowed to say what it was. So we'd be blind tastings, and we were all
man,
what it was.
Can only imagine some of the stuff that was there. And you can imagine with
people like that. And I just so happened to have this Rum JM special bottling done for a French retail group.
Okay.
And it was very special. So it was single barrel selected by them and poured it out, and everyone went, "Holy hell, this is amazing." To the point that 2 of them said this is the best rum they've ever had.
Oh my God.
And I'm going, okay.
That means something in that room, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And Chris von Setting, he got the closest. He does the rum after dark or rum in the dark. I always get it mixed up. Yeah. Anyway, Chris came closest. He didn't quite get it. And Ben did as well. Ben's got an incredible palate and knowledge as well. Ben Booth of Tomasi. Anyway, the 2 of them came close. And so when I revealed it, they were just going, "Oh my God, where can I get this? Where can I get this?" I said, "I don't think you can." That then became a mission for me to find at least 2 bottles to give to those guys next time I'd see them.
Were you able to get them?
Yes, I was. I was able to hunt them down in the smallest of villages in France. So that was a fantastic trip in itself.
Yeah.
Driving through France with 90 bottles in the car, driving through trying to find this rum in little towns through France.
Oh my God. I feel like I would have been sweating bullets, like with that much rum, like just driving around the countryside and like, please don't pull me over for some random reason. I have no idea what France is like, but I feel like in the US I would be sweating bullets with that much rum.
I would feel like I was driving like an armored Brinks car.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
Just expecting like rum thieves to like box me in and like a heist situation to happen, right? I want to transition a little bit to talking about some of the distilleries and different places you saw. Just big picture, zooming out, we mentioned some of the countries that you went to, and we'll dive into some of the specific places throughout the conversation and probably when we do the intro for the episode as well. But of everywhere that you visited, and I know this will be a hard question, so you maybe don't have to narrow it down to just one, but what is the place out of all the distilleries that you would say is like a run, don't walk destination for rum enthusiasts? If you're a rum fan who's at home and you're like, I want to go see more places, and I know you went to Barbados, which I think is one of the big rum destinations, but you also went to a lot of other places that I think are visited less often than places like Jamaica or somewhere like that. So what's a place that maybe people aren't thinking about that you were just like, oh my God, you have to go here if you love rum?
Before you answer, Richard, I just have to tell people that are listening this and can't see your face the anguish as Will was asking this question, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can see it on your face. So go ahead. I've also wanted to stall a little bit to give you time to think. It's a tough one.
Well, imagine what I'm going to be like during the rapid fire. So I think, and this is really gun to the head sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I would say Guadalupe, and in particular, go to the little island off there, Marie-Galante.
Yeah.
I'll explain why. So there's a few things in that. Firstly, the Holy Grail sort of countries, Jamaica, Barbados, Cuba, that all makes sense. Don't get me wrong. And that's important as an experience, and people should do what they like anyway. But for me, it was, you know what? I kind of already know, inverted commas, that. Mm-hmm. I can kind of pick up that later. What I need to do is I need to explore Agricole. So that's where it started for me, is saying, you're talking about terroir. Mm-hmm. So straight away, that means sense of place. So to be able to go to the place, to me, became important. How they juice, so the different crushing techniques through to their fermentation, distillation, and maturation. The way I would explain the difference between Martinique and Guadeloupe, in fact, I had a few of the Martinique guys hit me on about this. I said, I love Martinique rums, but if you look at Guadeloupe, to me, they're just a little bit more rustic. They're just a little bit more, and this is a real broad sweep, because obviously within even one distillery, and you get quite a variance in terms of their expressions. But the point I'm trying to make is, you just get this sense, this feel that they're just doing it just that little bit more, robust, rustic way in Guadeloupe compared to Martinique. Martinique, I'd say, is the more refined end, if I was to go that far. And when I say, I don't mean refined in terms of you don't see some killer rums in Martinique, you do.
Yeah.
Be they, your big Brut de Colons or whatever. Mm-hmm. So when you're in Guadeloupe, there's also there's less people going there, so there's a higher appreciation when people visit. So that's the other reason. Okay. I feel that Guadeloupe is very much something that people should consider. Then when you get on that ferry and you go out to Marie-Galante, and there's 3 amazing distilleries there, and you're seeing a horse and cart, an ox, and cart come up with a load of cane. You're just going, okay.
Yeah.
Or even just afterwards, you're down on one of the little beaches, and out comes a bottle, and you're just making tea ponches all the night, and it's costing you, maybe €10 for the bottle.
Wow. Yeah.
It's that sort of. It's just, I haven't done enough traveling, obviously, in the rum world, but I feel that for my experiences, it felt like this is still very authentic. It's not overly done. Now, again, don't misunderstand me. Martinique is just as special, but I feel Guadeloupe, gun to head, was where I'd go back again. In fact, I did. I flew back to Guadeloupe a second time.
Right. How many of these places did you go to twice? I think 16 of the distilleries you went to twice?
Madeira and Guadeloupe are the 2 rum countries I visited twice, because Madeira. And that's the thing. I don't know when you want to talk about Madeira, because that's just, again, and I'm not over-dramatizing this. Madeira is a very, very special place. The rum is incredible. The people are amazing.
Really?
And you get a completely different sense of what rum's about for them. Mm-hmm. And they're a lot older in terms of sugarcane, so likely a sugarcane distillate as well, way, way before the Caribbean.
Right.
I mean, you're talking 250 years before.
Yeah.
So they've got that. You walk the Levada systems, which is how they, a bit like the Roman aqueducts, is how they got the water over from the northern side where it rains over to the dry side, the southern side, and so you're going through all these steep sort of mountainous roads, and there's the levada systems and the terrace systems where it's either wine or grapes or cane growing. It's a step back in time as well.
Yeah, I feel like Madeira is sort of the forgotten agricole producing island, right? Because like you look at the agricole regulations and it's like French overseas departments and Madeira. It's just kind of like stuck on there, and we talked a little bit about it with Peter Holland because he has some extensive experience, and Boutique has bottled some Madeira rums. I still haven't had that much experience with those rums. I've had some William Hinton stuff, but I think you went to 5 different distilleries in Madeira. Is that right?
Yes, there are 5. There are 4 traditional ones. Of that, 3 really do focus on rum. Okay. The 4th is really, it's an afterthought. They're more about food production. To supply to the food producers. You've got William Hinton, you've got Orangio, so that's Pedro doing his stuff under the basement, and doing a live broadcast back to New Zealand Rum Society was so much fun on that one. That's
you
hilarious.
Did that. That's awesome.
That's cool.
Oh, it was hilarious. The other one is Ingenios de Nort, which is, amazing too. I mean, those 3. Then you've got a newer distiller there. He's doing some pretty good stuff, but he's, on his journey. And then, as I say, the other one is not there. They produce a lot of sugar, honey, sugar syrup, basically, for the food industry. There's another guy, very old guy, who's been making rum, but he keeps the door closed. I don't believe you can get in there unless you really, really know someone, and even then it depends on what sort of mood he's in on the day, apparently.
Did you make it in there?
No, I didn't. Okay. Even me, I didn't get
I was going to say, if you can't get in there, that's pretty tough.
And that's thanks to Peter Holland. That was an example of online a year earlier, hearing about Madeira and going, I've got to be there. I've got to go.
Yeah. So what would you say, because it's in that agricole category, and you already talked about how, like, I feel like a lot of times we lump Martinique and Guadeloupe, Marie-Galante together, even though, as you pointed out, there's some key differences between their rums. But I think we view Madeira as even further separate, obviously because of the geographical difference. But in your mind, is there any big differentiator between the style of rums you encountered on Madeira versus what you encountered in the Caribbean agricole producers?
Yes, there are. I think it depends which way we want to come in on this. If we're talking about from a flavour profile, you do get a lot more of that briny saltiness, that olive, sort of green olive notes.
That's what I noticed with the William Hinton rums that I've had.
Yeah, exactly, Will. And it's more pronounced in some expressions than others. And then, of course, the other part of that's a lot to do with, or more noticeable, I should say, and they're unaged. Then when you look at their aging programs, they're all pretty much centered around ex-Madeira casks, for obvious reasons. So that's, again, giving you a different flavor profile to, ex-cognacs, that sort of thing. Again, that's not to say that they aren't doing, especially William Hinton, doing a lot of laying down lots of different barrels, you name it, they've got it.
Okay.
And again, in Martinique and Guadeloupe, they're using ex-bourbon as well, things like that. My point, though, is you start picking up as you spend more time trying the different rums. You can pretty much go, yep, that's probably from Madeira, compared to, yep, that's from Guadeloupe, that's from Martinique. I feel like I could probably confidently do that at least 75% of the time, possibly higher now. So there are differences, yeah. But then if you approach this from more of the production point of view, the economics of Madeira are such that there's a lot of government support. Okay. They set the price to the cane grower. So that's set between the rum producers working with the government and the cane producers. Okay. Because those cane producers, they're very, very small parcels, and they keep getting smaller and smaller as each generation, that sort of thing. Okay. And secondly, if it isn't productive or economically worthwhile for that farmer, they'll just switch to banana crop or something else.
Ah, okay.
So there has to be a level of trying to keep a steady
the sugarcane
supply.
industry alive, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And IVBAM, which is the government-backed agency, the government agency backing this, they have made the commitment. So they've got to look at this from a sustainable point of view. And of course, it all starts with the sugarcane. So that's the first thing. That sugarcane arrives on the most hilarious of methods, but probably the worst is you see they're mountainous, windy roads.
Okay.
And you see these trucks arrive, which are just so overloaded, or small flatbed vans.
So it just looks like a pile of sugarcane with like a tiny little set of tires underneath it.
Exactly. So it's even crazier than some of the stuff I saw in Guadalupe. And then it's just all dumped. So they don't really know, unless they're specifically getting one particular supplier, one particular farmer. They have no clue what sort of cane they're getting.
It's mixed in from a lot of different small parcels, basically.
Exactly. So that affects quality. By quality, I mean it could screw up their machines because it's all dirty. It's still got lots of leaf on it, all that sort of thing, through to bricks level, let alone trying to differentiate which variety. They got just no chance. Add to that, if you certainly look at Orangio, but they're not the only ones. When that cane arrives, the school of thought is always you then crush it as soon as possible because it's starting to deteriorate, it's starting to actually ferment itself. And well, as far as Pedro and others are concerned, it's like, doesn't matter. So sometimes it sits out in the yard for, could be 2-3 days, could be a week.
And that's the cut cane stalks, right?
Cut cane stalks.
Okay,
and generally they are, well, again, this differentiates. Generally, though, they're full length, so you're not getting those smaller cuts because most of it has to be hand cut because it's all steep.
Okay,
right. You can't get machines in there, so most of it's hand cut. Therefore, it's full length most of the time. Yeah, it's less of an issue compared to if it was small cut stuff. Yeah.
So going back to the Caribbean side of things, I feel like there's only a small slice of those agricole producers that you're really able to conveniently access if you live, I know in the United States, I know in Europe, and obviously in France, that access opens up quite a bit more. I'm assuming it's a similar situation in New Zealand as it is to the United States in terms of available rum agricoles, though I could be wrong. But what were a few of the distilleries you were able to experience there? The big three that we can get in the United States in most places, I think, are Clement, Rum GM, maybe some Nissan, and you do see other ones, but I'm talking about like widely available. So were there any that you were able to maybe experience for the first time there, or that you hadn't experienced very much that you're just like, wow, this is great stuff that needs to be, that deserves more attention from the international community?
Great question. Well, firstly, almost all. Yeah. So in New Zealand, you get a smattering of Clement comes through, along with Trois Rivières.
Okay.
There might be the odd other bottle comes in occasionally, but that's about it. So my experience has been more where I've brought in bottles myself, ordering on Whiskey Exchange, that sort of thing. But again, it was relatively limited, maybe, 6-7 bottles. Then I met a Kiwi who's just an incredible guy, Brian. He was in the UK. He's one of the old school in terms of the rum community in the UK. He was there, beginning of it all happening. So he's known by everybody, well loved. He turned up at my house about a month before I left and said, right, we're going through some agricole rums. Now, obviously, I knew he was coming. I thought he was just going to bring a few bottles. He bought, I don't know, maybe 20, 30.
Wow.
And La Favorite right through to Nissan, you name it. So I then had like this crash course, master course with him. And he's amazing.
So we can blame this all on Brian then, Richard. We can blame all of this on Brian.
It blew me away. And again, maybe a slight digression. It took me back to my progression in terms of understanding spirits, which is actually off the back of wine. I spent a lot of time understanding wine. I'm a second level som, so I understood flavor through to, obviously production for wine. And you don't have, there's some things you can take with you in terms of molasses-based rums from those experiences. But when you first try agricole, you go, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
Now, and you're picking up the differences between the varietals, a red cane versus a black cane, all of that
it's
sort
like
of
grapes
stuff.
versus grapes, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then all the nuances, what you feel, the floral notes. You don't get really floral notes predominantly at all in molasses rums. And by that I mean is you're smelling rose petal, and then you're going, this is like a orchard in springtime. I can smell the buds, the apricot buds, the peach buds. You don't get that in a molasses rum, really. And so that's why it became important for me to then experience what I did in the French territories.
Right.
Every distillery I went to, incredible, just incredible. They all had great expressions. Off the top of my head, I think the ones that people aren't really need to hear more of is Montebello, for sure. They rest their rums a long time. So I know you've talked about this before, but I believe flavour does change, be it in the mellowing, be it whatever effect, don't know. But if those are sitting in those tanks, I absolutely know from first-hand experience the difference between it sitting there after 4 years.
Yeah.
It's the same as actually Orangio does the same thing. I tried one after sitting 6 years.
Well, they don't just let it sit there for no reason, right? There's
Exactly.
a reason.
One would imagine.
There's a reason.
Yeah, but John and I have talked about that and whether, like what do you consider aging, for example? And, I've mentioned how to me that's time in a barrel, right? But time is time. It's interesting how we think about that. And yeah, there still is kind of a block in my mind between resting versus aging, even though I know that both things do stuff to the liquid, right? Something happens.
Absolutely.
Even though it's different. Yeah.
Yeah, well, even if you think about resting and those very old, big 1,000-litre, what they call foudres, if you think about those aren't giving anything anymore.
Right.
I mean, and they're often sitting resting. This rum I'm drinking now, this Tomasi, is a good example of that. This has been rested for 7 years in one of those foudres. It, for me, the best, in fact, I didn't say this, one of the producers said if you think about it more in terms of when you make an amazing curry or even a bolognese, what's that like a week later or 6 days?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And yes, it might soften, but it just develops so much more flavour. I think that actually happens.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not a world expert, and it's just my experiences. But so digression off Montebello, but Montebello aren't the only ones. But Montebello, I'd look out for some of the special releases that Boulogne do. Rum Bologna is amazing, incredible stuff, especially their black cane stuff. There's a big move towards all of these Brut de Colons, as you know, these 70% plus stuff, what's coming off the still. Once you get used to that, you again get a lot of flavour there, lot of flavour. So I wouldn't be looking past that. A1710 absolutely should be on people's radar because it is truly phenomenal what they're doing. So they're a non-Agricole, non-AOC player. Have you heard of A1710? Wow. You probably have, I assume.
I've heard of them, but I don't know a ton of info about what they're doing. I wasn't aware that it was AOC Agricole.
They do their own thing. Lovely guys there. They are Martinique, and they're relatively new. I'm going to guess to say 6 years. I could be wrong on that. They have both a still out of cognac, so they've got a pot still and they've got a column still.
Okay.
Moniac one, and they will run them through both. They will do blends. They will do single, that sort of stuff.
And this is still a cane juice rum, just not done to the Agricole specifications.
Exactly.
That's really interesting because, in just all the conversations about GIs, particularly with Barbados and stuff and places like that, that's an interesting example of a place in Martinique where, they have the Martinique AOC, but here's someone still making a cane juice rum that is different and interesting in its own way, and just not going by that name, right? Which is very cool to see.
Yeah, I think it's well worth putting them on your radar. And probably the one making the most noise at the moment, because Luca got onto this one, is Papa Roy. Yeah. I went and saw them twice, and they're a lot of their ethos is based on the cane because their families, their forefathers, their grandfathers was all about the cane. And so they want to honor that with the way they then do their rum. It's a brand new distillery, comes off the back of a brewery. It's in the same site. And really interesting what they're doing. So they've got different varieties. They're putting stuff down. Their unaged stuff is very interesting. Again, very interesting.
Richard,
so put them on your radar.
Yeah, those are all fantastic. And I think we've jumped around a lot in talking about a lot of the exciting stuff that you did. I wanted to take maybe a quick step back because you mentioned you visited some of these places twice. And before I want to ask you about what the thought process and how that came about is, but maybe it's good to put that into the context of the trip as a whole now. So we've talked about you started in kind of the Caribbean, you ended up in the European Union for a while, and then I think my understanding is you went back maybe towards the Caribbean and then came home. But can you give us the layout of the trip just for people, and then what was the idea behind going to some of those distilleries more than once?
Okay, so we talked earlier about I wasn't going to be able to come back into my own country till at least February. I kept extending that. The rum shows were starting, the rum trade show season, if you like, in Europe was starting. I was in Paris. I was sitting with Dawn Davies, sitting with Mitch. I was sitting with Ian Burrell and a few others at a bar afterwards. And they all looked at me and said, "What's your intentions, Richard?" And it was like almost like I was marrying someone. And I said, "Well, I don't know." And that's when they basically planted the idea of, why not make this a year on the Rum Road?
So this was this idea was
pressure.
Forced on you, is what you were saying.
You got peer
pressured into doing this.
Well, some of the top people in rum go, "Well, you don't argue with them, do you?" So I thought, well, okay, let's just see how that then required a little bit of planning. That was like, okay, where do I need to be at what time? That was, if you like, also an opportunity to then say, well, if I'm doing this for a year and I'm in Europe, it's a hell of a lot easier for me to fly back to Guadeloupe or even Madeira or wherever than it is for me to try and do that from New Zealand. Because again, I can't emphasize enough, it's a hell of a commitment coming from New Zealand to anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere, especially during COVID times. And we probably won't have time in this show, but that itself is a whole story about how you deal with what I had to deal with
all
during
the
COVID
different
times.
all the different restrictions and things and the different man, that was probably a lot.
All I can say is to everybody out there, if you are traveling, use Airheartcom.
Okay, that's a good tip.
It gives you up to date within hours information of where you're flying from and where you're flying to, and it gives you what you need to know. So thank God someone finally told me about that and made my life easier. So what that meant was I extended my stay based in southern France or southwest France. That became my base.
Not a bad base. Not a bad base to have.
Yeah. You could do worse.
Great base. So in my time off, I did explore wine. And then, so I just go, they're only a couple of hours away from Bordeaux, that sort of thing. So by the time I'd done a few shows, a lot of the producers kind of knew me as well, or the representatives, and they were going, right, looking forward to seeing you at the next show, that sort of thing. That then turned into me actually jumping behind the stand for them. They go, "Hey, Richard, I've got to dive off. I've got a class.
We've got to run. Can you man the booth?" That's great.
This is great.
Yeah. So
it sounds like the best of all possible fever dreams.
It was incredible. I mean, a lot of trust there, and obviously, they were fine with it.
Did you have a going rate by the end of the trip? Like, okay, I'll give you 30 minutes for one bottle
every month.
Well, they definitely took care of me. I mean, some of those bars in Paris and in Berlin are very expensive places when you're on a budget. So that's, I guess, having that experience of getting behind a stand at a trade show, or a rum show, was incredible. I loved that. I loved engaging with the audience. I loved talking to them about my own experiences of the actual stuff I was in front of, telling them what I thought. And I was also able to frame it and saying, I don't work for this company, so I'm going to tell you the way I see it.
Right, yeah. That's great.
But it was all done with, obviously love, enthusiasm, and passion that I have for rum and the ones in front of me. I'll never forget, just recently actually, was I think the London Rum Show, or no, we were in Berlin for the bar one, and Zan Kong, I was behind the Worthy Park with the
nice,
23 guys, and he was just laughing at me, just like, God help me. And so he then in London said, hey, I've got to do a masterclass. Can you do the Worthy Park
There
one?
you go. Yeah.
With Serge. Serge was there.
Okay.
And we did it. You know, I love that. To me, that's the best part, is connecting in with other rum drinkers, because I am it. That's what I am.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not a producer. I'm not a representative. I'm literally could sit there neutral in inverted commas just because I love rum.
There were a couple of places in Europe you visited as well that I wanted to talk about. You mentioned Rummy Club earlier. You also made it up to Scotland and visited Ninefold. We had Ninefold founder and distiller Kit Carruthers on the Rumcast several months back, but we're seeing more and more of those places pop up in Europe right now, and it's really, we're seeing them doing really interesting things. I'm hearing some very impressive stuff about the rum that's coming out of there. But what did you take away from those visits, and how does it leave you feeling about the prospect of, you know, kind of this new wave of European rum production?
Firstly, rum is in good hands. I mean, that's that to me, you know, it's an exciting time to be in rum. I like the fact that rum is diverse. It's a very diverse category. We know that. Therefore, it means that for me, if you want to make rum in Czechoslovakia, go for it.
Yeah.
You know, it's as simple as that. It's about, if you can get hold of importing your molasses, and away you go. You know, buy your still, go for it, because that was being done before anyway.
Yeah.
This isn't new. You know, as Kit mentioned in his interview, Scotland was doing it back in the 1700s. You know, New Zealand was doing it in the 1800s.
Oh, really? I mean, that makes sense because Australia has its own history as well. So
yeah. So these new players, inverted comma new player, you know, I love what they're trying to do. They're obviously doing it because, one, they're again passionate about the rum. It depends on what we're talking about here. There's maybe two ways of looking at this. And again, I think I'm recalling what I think you guys said, I think maybe talking to Maggie Campbell, and that is, you've got those that are dedicated rum producers, and then you've got distillers that also happen to make rum.
A little bit. Yep. We see that all over the place in the US. So.
So I definitely experienced both of those. So sometimes it was, you know, they're on their way, bit of more encouragement, and other times it's like, they're there. They know what they're doing. And it's just a matter of time seeing what's going to develop, because obviously if they're talking more their aging program, we're not really seeing, you know, to a great degree what the capability is. We'll see that more, you know, after a more lengthier time.
And that's a question of not just time, but also scale, because they're starting so small, you can only put so much away, right? It's really hard for a new, you know, a distillery that's younger than 5 years or something to have like a consistently bottled, aged product that isn't kind of like a, you know, more like a single barrel type releases and things like that. So
exactly. You know, it's tough. It is really tough, and you do see it. You know, every cent they have, all of their capital's tied up in their equipment and the bottling costs have gone through the roof. Talk to anybody in the game, you know this yourselves. You know, supply issues, supply chain problems. It's very difficult, but they're all determined. They're all dedicated to the cause, and that's we need to support that. So I do what I can at my level. I certainly try and talk about all of these different people and then buy their product as well. In saying that, there's a whole world I've got to explore as well of the more, shall we say, traditional places. I mean, I haven't been to Jamaica, for example, so I've got that. You know, I'll probably go next month, I think. You know,
there you go. You've been home for what, a month or two now? That's plenty of rest. Get back out there. What are you doing?
So I've got a long way to go. So I don't want to sound like I'm kind of coming off the back of, I've explored all that. Now it's all about new stuff. I haven't. This is all new to me.
Of course. Yeah. John and I try to be forthcoming with that as well, and that there's tons of rum that he and I have yet to explore. Including so many of these, amazing agricoles you're talking about. I kind of think, for me, I might need to make 2023 the year of agricole, and just trying to source as many of these as I can and just dive deeper into the world, because I'm still in a place where, you know, a lot of times if I have an Agricole that I haven't had before, it's still like, oh my God, there's another side to this that I didn't realize was there, you know? So there's still just so much more to explore.
Yeah, there is. Well, it's a fantastic area, and you just go crazy when you come across one that's just offering so much just on the nose before you even try it, and you're just going, oh my God, and you just want to just sit on it, you know, just smelling it for, you know, it just keeps opening up, and that's exciting. And I'm not saying I haven't had molasses-based rums that do that for me, but times that by 10, times that by 100 in terms of Agricole rums.
Oof,
oh God,
enthusiasm.
yeah. Absolutely.
So, Richard, I know this was squarely a rum trip, but I know when you were in Scotland, you did mention that you saw a few Scotch distilleries. You visited Lagavulin and Springbank and some others. But I guess I wanted to ask, in visiting those Scotch distilleries, was there anything notably different or any different perspective on the distillation and the processes that they use there versus the rum distilleries that you visited, or anything you noted in that way?
Well, first, yeah, I did. I crossed to the dark side for about a month or so there. And the Scotch whisky industry is, well, the bits I saw were just so, the foundation of it, where they're at, what they're doing, it's very much how they've always, you know, done it, if you like. They are doing some levels of innovation, but it's very slick, maybe the wrong word to use, but very, you know, as you'd expect, I guess, in a lot of ways, you know, by the book. Everything's just exactly how it's done, and it's very clean. Whereas you go to the islands, in the Caribbean islands, you know, it's just there's stuff going on all over the show, and there's a bit of cane hanging out of the back of someone's computer, you know, all of that sort of stuff. So that was the first thing I noticed. But the second thing I noticed, and again, it's a double-edged sword, this one, the level of money. You know, you go to these distilleries and they've spent millions just on the front door. Yeah, you know, I'm being a bit silly, but you know what I mean. So their visitor centres right through, and how tightly things are done as well when you do these tours. What I mean by double-edged sword is there is, in some part of rum, this push to continue to premiumise, and we're seeing that happen in terms of some rum brands now getting recognition, like some of the top Scotch whiskies. If that continues, then we will probably see, this is just my view, and quite a few people who disagree, my view is that what I saw in Scotland, we will eventually see in some of these rum-producing nations, where it's very slick, it's all about the money, you know, it's a big capital, because they want to show and keep that positioning of super premium.
Well, I mean, a lot of those places, I mean, you mentioned Lagavulin, like, they're owned by Diageo, right? So you mentioned the level of money and the capital that's put into those places. And that's not to say that some rum distilleries aren't owned by some of the big, I mean, Appleton, for example, is owned by Campari. Mount Gay is owned by Remy Cointreau. So there's certainly, you know, that presence in some distilleries, but less prevalent as it is across the whole Scotch category, I'm sure. Yeah. It
is certainly a personal opinion or impression. As I said, when I walked away, I went, wow, this is just like next level. And again, there's another reason for me saying that is because I'd done a lot of the Scotch whisky, a number of them, about 25 years ago. So to see that difference.
So you'd seen some of them before that level of money came in.
Yeah. Very stark difference. As some of the newer ones on Aaron. And you're just going, wow, this is just next level, the amount of money that's being spent. And I kind of walked away with that thought, I wonder whether we're going to see that happen in the rum world, and I believe we will in some areas because of that. Again, it depends where we're talking. You're still going to have restrictions and, you know, some things you won't be able to do on an island, but overall, I think we're going to start seeing flash visitor centres and all that sort of thing creeping in. That's fine. No, I don't really have a problem with that. But that sort of, you know, it's sense of
authenticity,
you're right there.
I feel like
authenticity.
It seems like you're getting at. Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at. So,
yeah. I mean, money coming in can do great things, and there are positives to it, like you said. But I think, like, you see that in in anything. As something
absolutely.
becomes more popular and more money comes in, sometimes you can feel like it loses something. And that's not just in spirits. That can be with like a band you like, for example, something like that, you know, oh, they've changed, man, that kind of thing. But yeah,
it's sold out.
Yeah, exactly. But I wanted to get to a few of the other places because there's still, we've talked about a lot of the distilleries. You also mentioned, I know you were able to get visits in at E&A Shear, at Main Rum Company. We mentioned 1423 as well, which 1423 is an independent bottler. We just talked to them on a previous episode. E&A Shear and Main Rum are different from that, but they're both like things that exist outside of the distillery model. I'm sure that you came across many incredible sites, incredible casks, some of which maybe they have sworn you to secrecy against revealing. But what were some of the most interesting rums or observations, I'll just say, that you were able to make while visiting those kinds of places?
Yeah, again, it was a real privilege. It was an honor to be there. Very humbling as well, the introductions I had from very close friends to make these things happen. If we start with AOC, I met Carson at a masterclass in London. So that, I think, if you recall, I flew into London on that day. Right. And I was sitting there in one of his classes. I happened to be at the front, and he kind of picked on me and said, right, you. And he said, what sort of rum do you want to make? And he went through the, you know, how he does the, you know, what sort of style you want, and so on, you know, what sort of country, all that sort of thing. And I was like, oh, my God. But anyway, we got through that. We had a chat afterwards, and I said, look, I'm just beginning a bit of a trip. It'll be about 3-4 months. Love to come see you. He said, absolutely, come and see us. So that's how that kind of happened. When I got there, or just prior to going, I had connected with Niels, and there was a project still looking at doing it, and that was looking at a blend, a navy blend to honour. Well, if you look at the last Tot, and you know, Mitch did a fantastic episode with you guys. The last navy, you know, Commonwealth Navy to do that was New Zealand in 1990. So we kept it for another 20 years after UK. Yeah, wow. So I feel we should honour that at one of the anniversary dates. I love Black Tot. I'd like to support them around that. But I also feel maybe there's an opportunity to do a New Zealand blend around that. Yeah. And by that I mean try to keep to the traditions of the Navy, as in can't go back to the Navy stores, but the point is that source it from an EO share. So we talked about that. And so when I arrived, he had a lot of samples there. So we started off with that. But what was so amazing is this genuine personal attention that EO share give you, from the smallest little guy like me who right through to their biggest customer. It's the same. You get that sense. So the whole team was there. Oh, wow. So Richard was there, Marjon was there, Carson was there, and they just spent time with me, and he took me around the operation and said, "Yep, you can photograph that, but you can't photograph that." Yeah.
You can talk about this on the Rumcast, but you can't talk about that on the Rumcast.
Exactly. And then back up to this is their new office.
I was going to ask if you got to see the new office, because I remember, I think maybe in the last year or so they opened up a big, very modern looking building.
Absolutely. They opened that, actually, it must have been the end of October or early November of 21.
That's right,
And it's amazing. It's beautiful. It's part Mad Scientist Lab. When you go in, you see all of these samples, bottles, and all set up, and it's on this big stainless steel bench, if you can imagine, like an island type bench. And then there's a big wall of brands that they obviously supply to.
Right, yeah.
And then there's a seating area, and this is the upstairs sort of tasting area, if you like. It's beautifully done. And then as you walk down, there's this touches of their history, because, you know, it dates, I've forgotten how old, it's about 400-year-old company or something. Yeah. Mate, no, more than that. I think it's 600 years from its original inception. I can't remember. Anyway, that, as I say, still pales to the level of attention you get there. They are just the kindest people. So I then was able to try a few. We went into one of their old sampling rooms, or file rooms, if you like. And you're just going, oh, my God. And they're showing me these old files dating back 50, 60, 80, 90 years, you know. Wow. And you're just going, wow.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the story about 1423, how it's got its name. So you see all of these numbers, you know, everywhere. So that was like bit of an eye-opener, I guess, or a lovely thing to see. And then back up there to do some tastings of different stuff they had, which was amazing. So that's Asia. Yeah, it's a holy grail. If you can get a visit there, you should try it. Not necessarily easy, but they're all incredibly busy, but they are very open. Don't get me wrong. So
how did that visit compare versus Main Rum? Because they're basically part of the same company, but I know they're very different places, right?
Very, very different. So, EA Share, or the group that owns EA Share, purchased Main Rum later. Yep. Again, lucky to get there.
And this will be in Liverpool, whereas EA Share is in Amsterdam. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I specifically went to Liverpool just for that trip, I think. I don't even think it was off the back of anything else. It was met by Ian. He took me through. They've got a new site, so they've got a brand new offices and so on, which their client building, if you like, and very similar to what I just described before. But you go then to the very old T-bonded warehouse right on the docks there, and then you go underneath, down to this rickety elevator, and you just immediately get hit by the most incredible smell.
I'm sure.
It's musty, dusty, obviously vapors, rummy, everything. And then you're having to very carefully guide yourself around because the floor is just so slippery because it's all this. It's its own microclimate. So it's just like it's wet, it's slippery in some places. There's funguses and all God knows what. It'd be like a science experiment in there in terms of what's growing on the walls.
It's like a rum cave.
It's a cave. It's amazing. It's like, it's very difficult to put it into words. And then you start walking around and they're all got these codes, letters and numbers on the barrels. But, if you've got a little bit of, now so you kind of start figuring things out. You go, okay. So that there is a 19-year-old Foursquare over there. That's, right. And so on. So I started to play the spot the barrel sort of game. And Ian's laughing at me. I go, is that a? Yeah. I go, maybe. Can't tell you on that one. Is that a Legallion? I go, yeah, we can tell you that. And, that sort of thing. So that was hilarious. It was hilarious doing that. So there's two main floors, but then there's another floor right at the top, which is where there's some older bottles and stuff like that. So again, it's a step into time and history. Incredible place. But just while I mention that, just as a quick sidebar, Flensburg is another place people should think about going. Flensburg is where rum's first knit. It's a border of Germany and right at top of Germany, the border there of Denmark. Used to be actually part of Denmark. That's where all the rum came in from the islands, mainly Jamaica. And then the Germans would then do what they did with it. So we all talk about the high ester. That was basically a concentrated rum that they then watered down.
Diluted,
And it's a town. It's literally a town, not just its shipbuilding, there's a whole lot of other things if you're going back the 200, 300, 400 years history, or right back. The point is that they had a lot of rum merchants there. It's scaled right back. There's almost nobody there, but they set up a museum. So you walk into a sense of history around what it was like back in the day. What were they doing? How were they doing it?
Yeah.
From a European scene. So when we talk about Main Rum, when we talk about EA Share, it's not just they sure had their place in history, and their place today, but also Flensburg. I would encourage people to try and get there if they ever get a chance. So right at northern end of Germany there.
Yeah, that's great. I haven't heard many people talk about that. So yeah,
but maybe that's a good segue into 1423, which is the other one. So that was on my way to 1423. So Josh, I met him through friends again. I'd reached out and he said, yeah, sure, come by. And why an eye opener? You talked a lot, so we were, I'll try not to repeat anything you already did just the other week. The key thing for me, firstly, he's always got a bit of a glint in his eye, and he's just such a fun guy. Josh is he's incredibly busy, but he does make time, and he loves nothing better than, showing people what they've got. And, so on. Josh is all about the big rums. He's he'll probably tell me off for saying that. So the first thing he did is he hit me with these DOKs, these HLs, WPEs. Then we moved into some other Worthy Park stuff he was doing. But the fascinating thing was more around the new wood stuff and what that's doing.
So he was very excited about that.
Yeah, so these grind aromas, the Legalian grind aroma and the more traditional Jamaican ones and so on, when he's putting them in the Virgin cars, and he hasn't told me this at that point, he's just getting me to try the stuff and seeing what I think and then asking me to guess, And I swear there were so many that you would think were at least 7 to 10 years older.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
So to me,
here.
Yeah, he really is. And I think people, hopefully, he's going to help us, or me, adjust our mind around it's got to be long aged. I'm hoping we just get to a point where it's like, might be, can be, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Because of what he's doing. In particular, he's not the only one, but certainly it was an acceleration of my learning around maturation. And we got into deep dives around that as well, which was fantastic. But as I don't want to repeat from there. The other really great thing I had there was some of the Cuban rums he pulled out, the Sancti Spiritu stuff, because that's my next step, is to revisit the Cuba, because I did the whole, everybody does it, the Havana clubs and the normal Cubans, some of those flavored, that sort of thing, some not. But now I really want to go, well, what's it really like? What are these rums really like?
Yeah.
And go back a step, if you like, or deeper into there. So it was a privilege to be able to do that as much as I could at 4023. So new make stuff, well, not new make, of course, but, new stuff in barrel, so some of the 10-year stuff I was trying, that sort of thing. So that was another highlight, I'd say, of 4023. Huge warehouse, amazing people. The whole team there is just so lovely, And I know this sounds like a broken record, but it really is the people that made the trip.
Yeah.
It just is.
That's what it seems like, the common thread through all the stuff you're saying, all the shows, all the distilleries, all these places like 1423 and EA Shear. It's the people that you're meeting there and talking through all of the rum together, as you're trying some of these, but it's sharing in that moment.
Exactly. I mean, if this podcast was 2 hours long, I could then just thank everybody on air, but I owe a lot to a lot of people.
Well, I think one way you can repay them is by delivering a rapid fire performance for the ages. So,
Has anyone actually turned you down?
You could be the first. You could be the first to turn us down. Well, I think this needs no introduction for you. You're a longtime listener and supporter of the show, which we should be thanking you for, by the way. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing this experience. You certainly didn't have to come on and tell everyone about this, but we really appreciate getting to live vicariously through you and learn about some places that I think both of us and probably a lot of listeners need to look into more. I know I'm going to make that part of my agenda for 2023. But with all that said, John, I know you've been hard at work on some rapid fire questions. I think I saw you making some little adjustments and things like that throughout the interview as you learned a little bit more about Richard. So take it away, my friend. What do you have for us?
All right. Richard, we'll take it easy on you. We're not going to, put the brass tacks to you here too much with this rapid fire. I promise. We'll be nice. But, of course, the drill. Short answers only, as best you can manage here. We'll get through as many of these as we can in, quote-unquote, 1 minute, and we'll see how it goes. So, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Will?
I've got 60 seconds, and go.
Okay, neat or on the rocks?
Neat.
Column, pot, or blend?
Column.
Okay. Ooh. Wow. That's
single column.
Yeah.
Single,
okay. I wasn't expecting that. All right. Aged or unaged or rested?
Unaged. That'll cover rested as well. Then.
Okay. There we go.
Cane juice or molasses?
Cane juice.
Yeah, I think we definitely had you there. All right. If you could magically have one or two people that could come with you on your next rum trip, who are you taking with you?
Will and John.
Oh, wow.
I set him up for that, and he knocked it down, Will. Excellent. Thank you, Richard. All right. No, you did not disappoint there. All right. I know Kiwis, New Zealanders are called Kiwis after the kiwi bird, as you mentioned earlier. I have to know, what do they call a kiwi fruit in New Zealand? It can't be called a kiwi also.
Believe it or not, we call it kiwi fruit. It used to be called the Chinese gooseberry.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. So it did at least have a different name. I didn't know that either. All right. Some famous New Zealanders, Flight of the Conchords or Taika Waititi? Richard's like, I don't know either one of them.
They're Australian. No, they're not.
Okay.
Flight of the Concords. Yeah.
Okay. Peter Jackson or Flight of the Concords?
Peter Jackson.
All right. Was your trip inspired secretly by Frodo's journey from Lord of the Rings? Because it certainly sounds a lot like it.
Who's Frodo?
Well, you know what that means? I'm going to have to throw out all my other Lord of the Rings content. I would.
If you take Lord of the Rings away from John, he doesn't have much left.
I had a feeling, Richard, that you were messing with me there. All right. I am assuming you know a little about Lord of the Rings here, and I'm going to try something with you. If you know, New Zealand on your trip, of course, would be the Shire, right? Because that's where you're starting. So I want to name some other places from Lord of the Rings and see where do you think these most make sense to go with. So if I were to say Rivendell, home of the elves, fair and stately and regal, where do you think that is on your trip?
I've got no idea, John. You know what? Lord of the Rings just like went past my head. Flew by me 20 years ago.
We'll skip past that one. How about, did you make a point to visit the original Zealand while you were in Netherlands when you were there?
No, I didn't.
I'm like striking out on this one. All right, and finally, if money was no object, where would you know what? You scooped me with this one too, Richard. I was going to say, if money was no object, when would your next rum adventure begin, and where would you be headed to first?
Next week, Jamaica and Cuba, and then just keep going for money no object. I'll just keep going for 2-3 years.
There we go.
Wow,
that's
all right. Oh wow,
that was terrible.
John may overestimate how much the rest of normal people care about Lord of the Rings.
I think that's a fair statement. I think that's a fair statement. I should have asked a little bit more how much Lord of the Rings you knew. If I come to New Zealand, it's number 1 to see all the Lord of the Rings places, and number 2 to see you, Richard. So there you go.
Yeah, come visit me in my rum collection. That's for sure.
Exactly. Will almost spit out his drink there.
I'm going straight for the rum collection. I'll leave the Lord of the Rings travels to John. John, you can go do those tours. I'll just hang out with Richard.
Yeah, you and I'll just hang out. We'll just send him on his merry way, or what is it?
Exactly.
Whatever the Shire thing is. I don't know.
When I was trying to plan for these, I always try to put in some rapid fire research, if you will. And my wife was helping me in trying to look up stuff, and she said something that I wasn't aware of, which is that New Zealand has 0 snakes.
Oh.
She said there's no snakes in New Zealand. And I was like,
correct.
Really?
I've heard the same thing about Hawaii.
Ah, that's interesting. I didn't know that about Hawaii. Certainly true in New Zealand. There's almost nothing to kill you. Almost nothing. Unlike Australia.
It's like the opposite of Australia. Yeah.
I mean, you can't even open your door. In fact, once you open your door in Australia, something's going to kill you. But it's actually even inside.
It feels like New Zealand is a much nicer climate to be in, and that's nice. And 0 snakes.
0 snakes. No crocodiles. I mean, I suppose the odd shark would probably, take you down, but take one of the elves down, or what are they in Lord of the Rings? Elves? Or?
Yeah, elves.
Oh, there we are.
Or dwarves. See, Richard, you knew more than you thought.
All right. Well, Richard, before you go, as always, thank you for being here. It was great to have you on. I hope that your trip inspires other epic journeys across the rum world. If anyone is planning on taking an epic journey across the rum world, send us an email and let us know, because we'd love to hear about it. But any final thoughts to share before we wrap things up?
I'd like to do a shout out back to you guys. I love what you guys are doing. It's dedication. You're doing it for the love of it. You're not making any money out of it. And we need more of this. It's the way the world connects in, especially when you're in a remote place like New Zealand. It feels like we've got a global rum community. So I just want to give a shout out to you guys.
Oh, well, thank you. We definitely appreciate that. And to echo everything you said about how awesome all the people you encountered were, we've seen that many times over since we started doing this. Just the people we have on the show, and sometimes getting to cross paths with them in person and everything. And the rum community is what makes it all so special. So I know anytime I'm able to visit a distillery or whatever, you walk away and I feel like the most memorable thing is always a person or two that you meet along the way, so that's what's great about it. And I'm glad that it brought you to us so we could do this episode together. It's been a blast hanging out with you. And yeah, if we need to have a race now to see either you're going to make it to the U.S. first, or if we're going to make it to New Zealand first. I don't know which one will happen, but I'm confident that one of those will happen eventually.
We'll make both work. I'll do America and then you come down to New Zealand, whichever way.
That's Hawaii. We'll meet in Hawaii.
We can meet in Hawaii. There we go. We still know that if not no snakes, at least very few snakes in Hawaii. So, Richard Nicholson, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We'll put some links up for everyone to check out what you're doing with the New Zealand Rum Society. And yeah, thanks again for coming on the show. Pleasure to have you.
I was just going to say very fast, I forgot. People often will go to New Zealand, go to Richard Nicholson New Zealand on my Instagram. Don't do that. You won't see any rum. Go to the New Zealand Rum Society Instagram account. That's where I post if you're interested. God knows why you would be, but if you are, go there.
We will put some links to that in the show notes so you can find all the amazing pictures of the incredible, 90 plus rums. Richard is just keeping in tow with him at all times.
And zero Lord of the Rings content on either of those accounts.
Oh, man. All right. Thanks again, Richard.
All right. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Rumcast. We hope you enjoyed this great journey through the rum world alongside Richard Nicholson. Hey, if it inspires you to plan your own rum trip around the world, hopefully you'll spend a little more time than 4 days planning it, or not, because that would make for a great story. Let us know if you are planning any epic rum journeys. Send us an email, host@rumcast.com. That's HOST@rumcast.com. And also we'll put a link up to the New Zealand Rum Society so you can check out and see what Richard is doing there. And yeah, if you want to share any stories from your own rum travels, a great other place to do that with us is on social media. John, where can they find us there?
You can get us at the Rumcast on Instagram or Facebook, Twitter in some cases. And we try hard to get back to everybody there. We've had quite a bit of interaction lately and really appreciate hearing from everybody. We get a ton of questions about people that are traveling, they're looking to do things, and we're always happy to help with whatever we can. Of course, we're not the authority, Will. We just have fun doing this and try to provide accurate information as best we can, or embarrass ourselves trying, which is also a possibility. But we're always happy to chat, and so definitely reach out to us there. We're happy to talk with you there. So,
and if you want more Rumcast, you can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/therumcast, patreon.com/therumcast. We're doing bonus episodes, we're doing happy hours, all kinds of fun stuff there. So check us out there, support the show if you would like to. And John, I guess that's it for this week. We've been fast and furious in lining up 2023 interviews all this week. So we've got some really good ones coming down the pike. A few people we've been wanting to talk to for a long time that are going to be on the show for the first time here in the next coming few weeks and months. Yeah. So keep an eye out for those. But yeah, until then, I'll talk to you.
See you next time.